Think about your childhood for a moment. Did you ever feel like you were different, but you never knew why? Maybe you never quite fit in. Maybe people misunderstood you. Maybe certain moments stayed with you long after everyone else forgot them. Or maybe you've spent years wondering, why did I have to go through all of that? Most people look back at their childhood and see random memories. Some remember rejection, some remember loneliness, some remember pain, and some remember mistakes. But what if God sees preparation? What if the things that confused you the most as a child were actually the first signs that God was preparing you for something greater? Because here's something many believers never think about. God rarely begins preparing someone the day He calls them. Throughout the Bible, He starts much earlier. Long before David ever stood before Goliath, God was preparing him in lonely fields with nothing but sheep. Long before Joseph stood in Pharaoh's palace, God was preparing him through rejection, betrayal, and seasons that made no sense. Long before Esther wore a crown, God was quietly positioning her for the moment that would change a nation. Preparation always comes before purpose, and the same may be true for you. Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." Think about that for a moment. Before your first prayer, your first church service, before you even knew who God was, He already knew you. And if that's true, then maybe your childhood wasn't just something you survived. Maybe it was where God quietly began preparing the person you were becoming. Today, we're going to look at 7 signs God may have been preparing you since childhood, even before you knew Him. As we go through them, don't just listen. Look back, because by the end of this video, you may discover that God has been writing your story far longer than you ever realized. Sign 1. You always felt different. Maybe you never felt like you completely fit in. You weren't better than everyone else. You just felt different. People misunderstood you. Sometimes even your own family didn't understand you. That feeling wasn't necessarily rejection. Throughout Scripture, God often set people apart before He called them. Joseph was different from his brothers. David was overlooked by his own family. Jeremiah was set apart before he was even born. Maybe the reason you never felt like everyone else is because God never intended you to be. Sign 2, you felt things more deeply than others. Maybe you couldn't ignore someone else's pain. Injustice bothered you. Harsh words stayed with you. You cared deeply while everyone else moved on. For years, you may have thought you were just too emotional. But what if God was shaping compassion instead of weakness? The people God uses often learn to carry the burdens of others before they ever carry His calling. Sign 3, you grew up faster than you should have. Maybe your childhood wasn't easy. You faced rejection, loneliness, loss, or responsibilities no child should have carried. While others were simply growing up, you were surviving. It wasn't fair, but throughout Scripture, God often prepared His people in difficult places. Joseph learned faithfulness in a prison. Moses spent years in the wilderness. David learned to trust God alone before he ever became king. Sometimes hardship isn't the end of your story. It's where God begins preparing it. Sign 4, you always felt like something was missing. Even when life seemed normal, something inside you kept searching. Achievements didn't satisfy you. People didn't complete you. You always felt there had to be something more. Ecclesiastes says God has placed eternity in the human heart. That emptiness wasn't proof something was wrong with you. It was evidence you were made for something this world could never satisfy. Sign 5, you were drawn toward God before you understood Him. Maybe you didn't know much about God, but something about Him always captured your attention. Certain Bible stories stayed with you. Worship moved you. A prayer felt strangely familiar. Just like Samuel, before he recognized God's voice, God was already calling his name. Sometimes God introduces Himself long before we fully recognize Him. Sign 6, your calling left clues. Think about what came naturally to you. People trusted you. They came to you for advice. You encouraged others without trying. Maybe you naturally protected people. Maybe you naturally led. Those weren't random personality traits. David was protecting sheep long before he protected a nation. God often plants the seeds of our calling years before we recognize them. Sign 7, looking back, you can finally see God's hand. Now think about your life again. The closed doors, the unexpected friendships, the pain you survived, the opportunities that seemed accidental. At the time, they looked like random events. Now they look different. Because the more you walk with God, the more you begin to see His fingerprints all over your story. Maybe he wasn't absent after all and was quietly directing your steps the entire time. And if he was faithful before you even knew him, you can trust him with everything that still lies ahead. So, what do all 7 of these signs have in common? They all point to one truth: God was working long before you realized he was. The day you gave your life to Christ wasn't the beginning of God's work. It was the moment you finally became aware of the work he had already been doing. Maybe that's why your childhood never fully made sense. You were trying to understand it while you were still living it. But now you're looking back with different eyes. The rejection, loneliness, and even the pain looks different. Not because it wasn't real, but because God was preparing you through it. Romans 8:28 reminds us that God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. That doesn't mean every moment was good. It means none of it was wasted. But there's one more thing you need to understand. If God has been preparing you for his purpose since childhood, don't expect the enemy to ignore that purpose. Throughout scripture, whenever God prepared someone for something greater, opposition wasn't far behind. The same preparation that points to your calling often explains the battles you're facing today. So if you've ever wondered why the closer you get to God's purpose, the harder the fight seems to become, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in the next video. I'll show you the 4 specific ways the enemy attacks believers before their breakthrough. And once you recognize those attacks, you'll stop seeing them as random struggles and start recognizing them for what they really are. Because understanding your preparation is only the beginning. Recognizing the battle is what prepares you to walk into your breakthrough.